conversar em português. Abrindo as atividades do primeiro congresso brasileiro de ecologia das estradas, temos o grande prazer de apresentar o Dr. Richard Forman. Resumir as contribuições de Dr. Forman no contexto de ecologia da paisagem e ecologia de estradas é quase impossível, mas podemos afirmar, pelo menos, que ele literalmente escreveu os livros sobre esses temas. Começando em 86 com o livro Landscape Ecology e chegando à publicação de Road Ecology em 2003, Dr. Forman tem sido uma força proeminente e pioneira na integração dos estudos de padrões ecológicos com alterações humanas do ambiente. Dr. Forman atualmente é PSC, professor de Ecologia da Paisagem na Universidade de Harvard, nos Estados Unidos, um fellow da Associação Americana pelo Advancimento das Ciências, é autor de um grande número de significativas publicações em ecologia de estradas, pelo menos 8 livros, com 9 em caminho. Nós temos o enorme prazer de ter Dr. Forman aqui para realizar a conferência de abertura do Road Ecology Brazil 2010. Dr. Forman.
Please excuse me for speaking English. I can speak some Spanish and some French, but I'm illiterate in Portuguese. It is an extreme honor to be here at this meeting and to be with our distinguished leaders that you just heard from, and to have been invited by Professor Alex Badger, who invited me to Brazil. There's no country I would rather come to for this subject than Brazil. And this is a great opportunity, a great pioneering event. And I hope that it is the catalyst, the stimulus for great discoveries ahead and practices and policies. I do want to say that when I was young, I'm still young. When I was young, I used to play semi-professional football, and Pele was my inspiration. And then later, I had one opportunity to see Pele play, and he was fantastic. He scored 2 goals, and I still remember that Pele could see all the way around him. He had vision 360 degrees, and that's why he was so successful, maybe. So what I would like to do today is to talk about road ecology, and I will have many ideas here, and I will express them briefly, so that hopefully everybody here finds some ideas that are useful and interesting. With that, let's start. Maybe. Magic. So I'd like to start with some discussion about wildlife and safe passages, which I think is of interest here. And then some traffic, the vehicles, the road size, a little bit on stormwater perhaps, and then broaden to the whole network of the landscape and region, and perhaps at the end a few things on transportation planning. Okay. In the broadest sense, road ecology as an area of knowledge, an area of discovery, area of study, its application for society, for the people, for government. It seems to me there are two very broad goals or objectives. The first one is to simply improve the environment, the natural environment, near every road segment in the network. And in different places it will be different solutions, that's fine. But just to improve it a little bit. And the second big goal then is the road network crosses the whole landscape. When you go in an airplane, you see the network and the landscape. And to integrate the road system, or road network, with both nature and water. And so I've called it integrated with a sustainable emerald network. That is the large green patches on the land that are connected, and also with near natural water conditions. And that's a big challenge. That's a very difficult one, and it requires looking to the future and thinking not just about this little road, but thinking about the network and the landscape. Here's an example from some work I've done in Barcelona, in España. The city of Barcelona. Is it on the top? No problem, no problem. I can wave my hands. Barcelona is a city down at the bottom, and those are big green areas, conservation areas and parks. And they're connected, and their proposal is to connect them with corridors of various sorts and to make an emerald network. Now, of course, the road network goes through that. And so the big challenge is, how can we make the road network consistent with the big green network or emerald network? So now let me switch to wildlife and animals and crossings and passages. And these are sort of the four basic ways that a road, a single road, will affect wildlife. It would be nice to have this work. Can you show me? You can see the first is, oh, perfecto. Habitat loss is simply the area where the road was built, and also the roadside. So that's obvious. You lose some habitat when you build a road. The second is the reduced habitat quality, and that means that the opening of the road has an influence on the surrounding forest or grassland or whatever it is that extends out on both sides. I was in maybe 3-4 days ago looking at El Arco near Rio de Janeiro. The highway that's now being built is an arco around, and there's one little place where the road had been just cut in 2 weeks through a forest, and so there was habitat loss for a rare species animal. And the question was, is it just the width of the road and roadside? And it's not. It's a wide zone extending into the forest on both sides where there's a habitat degradation, habitat quality loss. And then wildlife mortality is simply the killing of animals by the vehicles, and I'll talk about that briefly. And then the question of the barrier effect, or reduced habitat connectivity. In other words, the road is a barrier, or a filter, really. It's usually a filter. And so those are the four things. And the reason I like this little diagram is, notice on the vertical axis is wildlife population size, and before the road is built, the population is varying over time, like this. after the road is built, and those 4 processes have taken place, the population is smaller, and we know from various ecological studies that a smaller population fluctuates more in population size. It's a bigger fluctuation, as you can see there. And the problem is, then, small population, big fluctuations, that the population may become zero. It will disappear, and local extinction. So there's an overview, then, of the effects on animal populations, particularly. Yes. Dos momentos. ¿Y la próxima? That is, the vehicles that, yeah. What did you do? Yeah, this is a California book on flattened fauna. That means the animals that are flattened, and there are 2 examples there, animals flattened. Overall, the ecological effect of road mortality is minimal in general. And the reason is that the animals can make babies faster than the cars can hit them. So that, and that's true for most animals, but there's some animals that that's not true for. Next. And here's an example of a bear, and the animals where road mortality is really important are the animals that reproduce slowly. They can't make babies fast. They reproduce slowly, like bears and big cats and wolves and things like that. This is a picture I took in China. No, this is a picture from China. I was in China 2 months ago with the Ministry of Transport and the Chinese Academy of Transportation Sciences. And I like this for 2 reasons. That one, first of all, the road is very narrow. It's a 4-lane road, but they have a narrow strip in the middle, so the total habitat loss is less. So that's one good thing for the animals. And the second is interesting because here's a barrier going across, the road barrier, and there's a guard rail on both sides. It's a very strong one, with the transportation people know the 3 ridged barriers are very strong, and they're connected, and they're about 1 meter or 2 meters apart. And they plant shrubs down the middle, always, for tens and 20, 50 kilometers of shrubs down the middle. And then the shrubs grow up to about 2 meters or 2.5 meters. They have a machine that comes along and cuts off the tops of the shrubs, so that you always have a strip of shrubs that in the middle is protected, and it's strong guardrails, and then it's easier for the animals to get across. A very nice design, I think. Okay, now it looks a little complicated, but I know there are lots of good scientists in the room, and you love graphs. So what I've got down here is the number of vehicles per day that cross a road. Most of these data come from Europe. Number of vehicles that cross it today. So here's 2,500 vehicles. And the first thing to look at is this curve right here. This is roadkill. And you'll notice that if you increase the traffic, very low traffic numbers, roadkill increases, and you keep increasing, and then it decreases. And roadkill is very low later, more traffic. Notice this curve. This is the curve of species that come to the road and don't try to cross, but instead they're repelled and they go back. They don't try to cross because of the traffic and the noise, and it's dangerous. And you'll notice then that when there's little traffic, almost all of them try to cross. And then when there's a lot of traffic, most of them, 90%, then come to the road, a lot of traffic, go back. It's dangerous, noisy. And the result is this curve right here, the success rate of getting across. And you'll notice that when the traffic level is in this range here, the success rate drops very, very low. It's not zero, but it's very low. So what's happening then with a lot of traffic is you're increasingly repelling the animals from crossing. And that's some of our work up here. Maybe I'll show you later. Suppose you were driving along an expressway like this, and you saw that. And you could read, and you were in Holland, and you could read Dutch, and that says wildlife crossing there. And I have been on top of that with a reporter for Radio Amsterdam, and this is 80 meters wide, 80 meters wide, and on each side there's a 2-meter high berm, soil berm. That is, it's soil like this high. And on top of that are shrubs and small trees planted up there. And so when you're on top, it's very quiet, no noise. And at nighttime, I have not been on nighttime, they tell me it's very dark. The lights don't come up there. And when I was up there, this was many years ago, and I said, oh, this 80 meters wide, it's big enough for football. Play football, it's a grassland. And the man from Radio Amsterdam said, well, it's good enough for the Dutch team, but not good enough for the American team. So I said, whoa, why is that? And so he turned his thing off, and he said, well, you know, the Dutch are pretty good at soccer. I should not say that. But the Dutch are pretty good. He said, but the Americans, when they play soccer, they're like a group of sheep. Because if the ball goes over there, they all go after the ball. If the ball goes over, they all go after the ball. So the Americans need a bigger field to play on. Anyway, this is very expensive. This is big, massive, and it comes a little bit out of some legal restrictions in Europe that makes them do this. But when the rain comes on that, at the bottom of it, there's a gravel and sand and a drainage pipe system. So the water from the rain drains to each end like this, and there's a little wetland, a little pond or wetland at both ends. And that attracts the animals to come to the edge of the crossing. So the animals then cross between, there's a national park on one side and national forest on the other side. Here's a diagram of one in France. You notice it's the hourglass shaped. It's quite nice because you can see visually from down here across to there, and from here over to there. The next one. This is in Florida, in the United States, one of my students, and this was designed for Florida Panther, Panther, big cat, and also for bears. And it works. In fact, right near his foot, there's a big imprint of the Florida Panther that went through here. This is very cheap. This is a box culvert. It's manufactured elsewhere, and it's brought on a truck and just dropped into place. The inside dimension is 2.5 meters, and it is about 7 to 8 meters wide this way. Almost 8 meters, a little bit less, 7.5. And this is another, a bigger one in Florida, and this is our Florida Panther, the Panther. You notice the radial collar on it. Here's an alligator. I must tell you that this is a collage. A collage. These are two photographs, different photographs. So those animals are not visiting each other there. But they built these overpasses, underpasses, 24 of them and more, and they did it for two reasons. The first reason was to get surface water to flow into a big national park, the Everglades National Park in southern Florida. And the second reason was to protect that big cat, and the population was in big trouble. And the results of those projects were three things. First, they reduced the mortality of those cats they reduced it by 40%. And the second was that they increased the water that went to the wetland, the park. And the third was the entire fauna, all the animals used these crossings. They did not expect that, but all the animals that were present used that. Here's some typical diagrams. This is a barrier in the center of the road. This is a Dutch example. Water flow in a culvert with wildlife pathways. I think Miriam Dawson will talk to you about this tomorrow. And here's this wildlife thing with a wetland there. And there are many designs that have been developed in Australia, and Europe, North America, and maybe in Brazil. Oh yes, this is a Dutch study, or at least European study, the same thing. I think we'll hear more about this tomorrow, the next one. So, one of the questions is where, if you are going to provide crossings under or over the road for wildlife, where do you put them? This is a Czech study in the Czech Republic. And the usual way to decide where to put them is, where are the animals crossing now, or where are the animals hitting vehicles now? And then you put it there. And I think that's not the right way to do it. I think that's not the right answer. Rather, if you think back to the earlier image I showed you, and I said, what we need to do is to think of a broad, connected area of large patches. I call it an emerald network. And think that's for the future, that will be there 30 years, 50 years, and more in the future. And map that, and then put your crossings for wildlife to make those big patches connected. And in many cases, it will not be where animals are killed today, I will explain that, but it will not be today's pattern, but think about tomorrow's pattern. Think about the pattern of crossings that make sense, that can be sustained for the future. That's the place to put the crossing structures, the underpasses, overpasses. This is simply from across Europe, the different countries in Europe, and all this says, I know I'm a scientist, and I put things like that, it's not interesting. This just simply says that many European countries have underpasses and overpasses. Some don't have many, but many exist, and some work well, and some don't. Now, let me switch now to traffic volume. So far, I've talked about the road, the animals, and solutions for that. Now, let's talk about traffic volume, or traffic density, maybe in Brazil. Do you use traffic density? Or traffic intensity? Traffic volume, okay. And this is a broad model, of course. And the idea is that if you double the number of vehicles per day from A to B, you double it, that the effect, the road effect zone, that is the width of effects out on both sides from the road, it doesn't double, it increases less, so you get a curvilinear response like this. So as you increase volume, initially, the width of the zone that's degraded by the traffic increases sharply, but gradually doesn't increase so much. Next. And so we've done some studies on this. These are 4 different roads in a similar area near Boston. A small collector road with maybe 5,000 vehicles per day, and bigger, still bigger, and then more than 30,000 vehicles per day. And we studied birds of conservation interest, grassland birds of conservation interest. And so this map, the dots are all the places where the birds could be, and the letters are where they are. And the thickness of the line is proportional to traffic volume. So that the thicker lines have more than 30,000 vehicles per day. And I'll show you the results of this. These are the results. There's one good thing here, and there are 2 bad things here. The good thing is that if you have only about 5,000 vehicles per day, then there's no significant effect on either the regular breeding or the occasional presence of these grassland birds of conservation importance. No effect. So with small amount of traffic per day, that's good, that we don't see an effect. The first bad thing is, though, if we have about 10 or 12,000 vehicles per day, there's no effect on the occasional presence, but there's significant reduction in the regular breeding of birds, that is the regular nesting and making babies. And this zone extends for 400 meters on both sides of the road. In fact, there was 0 in our study. There were no regular breeding cases within 400 meters on both sides of the road when you have about 10 to 12,000 vehicles per day. That's bad news, because that's a wide zone. And it continues, and the other bad news is when you have a big multi-lane expressway with more than 30,000 vehicles, there's a significant effect out to 1,200 meters on both sides. So in a big highway with a lot of traffic, and the traffic is the important thing, the more traffic, then there's a zone of degraded habitat for more than 1 kilometer in this direction and also in that direction. So if you want a nature reserve, then don't put it near a busy highway or a future busy highway with more traffic. And there's one other set of data from Europe that agrees very closely with this. This is interesting. I'm sorry you can't read this. This is from Reichman's work recently. And this, on the vertical axis, it's amount of traffic. It's the same thing. Amount of traffic up to 50,000 vehicles per day. On the vertical axis, it's the percent of the species, and these are birds, I think. I think these are birds. The percent of the bird species which are affected by the traffic. And it increases with low traffic, it increases to about 50%. About half of the bird species are affected by the amount, or correlated with the amount of traffic. And almost all of those are negatively affected. So almost 50% of the avifauna, that is the bird species present, are negatively affected by the traffic. And let me say at this point, we don't know for sure what the traffic effect is. But all of us agree that almost certainly it is traffic noise. Traffic noise is the thing. It's not the visual, it's not pollution, and then there's some other hypotheses, but the main hypothesis, we all agree, it's traffic noise, and there's increasing indirect evidence of that. Like birds that change the frequency, that change the pitch, what do you call it, pitch? Change the tone, okay, what is it? Okay. Anyway, the birds near the busy road will sing, the same species will sing at a different pitch. And then farther out, they'll sing at a different pitch. Okay, next. And the big cause of traffic noise has to do with the tire and the road. That is, there is some aerodynamic noise, and there is some, the machine, the motor and the powertrain makes noise. But the biggest noise, this is in decibels, the biggest noise is a tire, and it's actually the tire and the surface of the road. And both the tire design and the design of the surface of the road can be made quieter. I have good transportation publications, and other people do too, that you can make tires quieter and you can make road surfaces quieter. There's some trade-offs there. Yes, we need new thinking. There's some children made this, and I thought this was nice. I think it's from Germany. We need new thinking. That's what this says. Thanks. This is in China 2 months ago, and I just want to show you a big road like this, and a small road over here, another small road. And they use trees and they use shrubs a lot. They're planting enormous amounts of trees and shrubs along all the roads that I saw. And here's an example. They're making it also pretty beautiful here with flowers here, shrubs here, and then the trees above. Very, very typical. Not just outside the cities, but not. This is near the cities here, but this and this are out in the rural areas. They're massive plantings. Next one. Roadsides and non-native species are of great interest to some people. The next one. And this is a study from New Zealand, where New Zealand is very concerned with non-native species. And here's the road, here's the ditch, and there's the vegetation beyond it. This is a very large study with a lot of data. And there's some interesting patterns that come out of this. The first is that the total number of non-native species, plant species here, is constant as you go from the road shoulder out here. So the non-native species are abundant and the same number all the way across. The second thing that's interesting, the number of native species are few here, but they increase until they are 50% of the total, or at least they're equal to this. There, not 50%, they're equal to this. So the non-native species are doing well here and not doing well here. The third thing that's interesting here is that there are some rare native species. That is what we might call endangered, rare, threatened species in roadsides. And there's no state or country in the world that has mapped them, as far as I know. That every manager or roadside manager will tell me, oh yes, we take care of them. But nobody has mapped them and nobody really knows where they are. But they are present. And the final thing is, notice there's also some rare non-native species. That is, a non-native species with one individual or two clones. And notice the interesting thing there is, if you were interested in not stopping this spread of non-native species, the invasion, then maybe this would be a good thing to do. Go and find those and get rid of them, eliminate them. That might be a very effective way to reduce the spread of non-native species, if you're interested in that. Okay, now this gets into driving. I suppose in Brazil everybody drives. Is that right? Everybody in Brazil drives. Maybe. Anyway, suppose you were driving. This is in the Rocky Mountains, in Wyoming. Suppose you were driving along this road. You were driving. You would probably go slowly, wouldn't you? You would drive slowly. And the reason you would drive slowly is because of this vegetation is right next to the road, and this vegetation is right next to the road. So it turns out that there is a literature, and it's a very interesting literature. It comes from psychologists, it comes from landscape architects, from ecologists, from engineers, and the literature says, the next one I think, the literature says that on average, drivers drive more slowly on narrow two-lane highways than on wide two-lane highways. Okay, so that road you drive slowly. If it's wide open, you drive faster. All right? And then down here, drivers on narrow highways drive further from the road edge. They stay in their traffic lane, but they're closer to the center line, so they're kind of over here a little bit, like that. And there's actually a very interesting literature. It's not a large literature. I found about 20 or 25 papers. And the idea is that you drive more slowly if the perceived width of the road ahead is narrow. It's not the actual width. It's the perceived width. You perceive, I perceive that ahead it's narrow, therefore I slow down. So if you are interested in, let's see what the next is. If you are interested in animal vehicle crashes, for example, big animals crashing into a car, you might be interested. Transportation people are very interested. Or even road kills. Well, this is a study mainly based on moose vehicle crashes. Moose is a big animal. Alces, big animal. And most of these data come from two-lane highways in Sweden, extensive data set. What's interesting, this is the posted speed limit. This is what the sign says, how fast you should go. This is presumably the safe speed limit. And what you notice, and this is the moose vehicle crashes per 100 kilometers per year, a very large data set. If you look at the black histograms, very few crashes, up to 70, and very large number of crashes here and also here. So there's kind of an indication of a threshold there at about 80 kilometers per hour. Do you use kilometers or miles? Kilometers. 80 kilometers per mile. And so if you can slow people down, slower to 80 kilometers per hour on two-lane highways, you'll have very few crashes like that. Now think about the previous slides about the perceived width ahead. If you could narrow the perceived width with vegetation, you could slow people down, not everywhere, not on a superhighway, but in parks, in some rural areas, especially, for example, in entering a village or entering a town. You could slow them down, and also you could reduce this and road kills. So here's sort of a summary, some of the values of having woody vegetation in the roadsides. In my country, the goal on highways is to have a big, wide area out there, open. And it actually, and they say for safety. But in many places, if you could make it narrow, you could slow people down and have fewer crashes and fewer animal crashes. So I will there are some other values there. I have a student right now, in fact we're giving a paper on this next month, on using the roadsides for agriculture, for growing crops. So you have productive roadsides, that's what we call it, productive roadsides, especially outside of cities where the transportation costs are minimal for producing food products and fodder and carbon sequestration and many other things we're doing there. And it's close to the city so that the products can be taken into the city. Oh yes, I should say something about water. Sometimes there's too much water and there's a flood. You see all these are all fish waiting to get across the road there. Those are salmon in the Pacific Northwest. They want to get across quickly after the flood. And I think I won't do this one, but the idea is here is that rain comes down, and the more impermeable surface you have, then the higher the runoff and flood level, the peak flow we call it, and the flood level. And also, streams dry out because the water is transported horizontally, and instead of percolating into the streams and supporting the vegetation. The next one. This is in China 2 months ago, and this is along a big expressway, a new expressway, and this is a rest stop, a rest area next where you stop when you're driving long distance. And I was with the landscape architect who designed this, and back here is where the trucks park, the lorries park here, and this is where the cars park here. And so one car parks here, another car parks here, another car parks there. And so what they're doing, not only aesthetically is it better, they think, but also it's reducing the runoff and having more water percolate down into the groundwater. Now, here's a test. You know, I'm a professor. We're at a university, famous university. Everybody tell me by pointing, which way is the front of that car? That's a very familiar object. It's a car. Every one of you sees cars every day. And everybody point, which way is the front of that vehicle? Come on, everybody. Everybody. Back there, come on. Which way is the front? This way or that? Everybody. Hey, you aren't right. That's very familiar. You see cars all the time. Right. Those of you that pointed this way are right. That's right. And look, that's a very familiar object. It's just you never see that from that angle. And that car then produces lots of things. And these are various pollutants listed along here. And what I've got here are actually pollutants, and there's the pollutants: nickel, sulfur dioxide, particulate matter, etc. And everything to the left of this line is caused by the road and roadside activities. And everything to the right of this line is caused by vehicles and vehicle use. And so you can see the various causes. And the purpose of here was to find one thing that we could do to reduce pollution, reduce stormwater pollution. And what this graph shows, this histograph shows, is there isn't any one thing. You can't do it. You could stop using fuel, use electric cars, but that would help there, but it wouldn't help these others. And so when you have a problem like that, there are only two solutions maybe. One solution is to have less of the pollutants from the beginning, so you build your cars so they can't make so much like that. So that's an automobile construction issue. Mercedes-Benz, for example, is very interested in that issue. The other solution is what we do in stormwater management. We try to retain stormwater from transportation. We try and retain it so that it doesn't disperse too far into all our water bodies. And we retain it in little depressions of different kinds in order to treat it or accumulate it or filter it. There are various ways of doing it. And so that's the problem there. It's a big problem. And our water bodies, our streams, our rivers, our ponds, our lakes, are significantly affected by these things coming from us, our transportation. And up to a point, this is related to traffic volume, but it's not completely related to traffic volume, as you can imagine here. And so when water runs off the road, here's some examples of wet. There's a ditch, and there's a little shallow area there. There's different designs, and you can think of various designs, partly to hold the water from runoff so it doesn't get into a lake or a stream and pollute it, partly to provide some biodiversity in the roadsides there. And those are the two main reasons we do it. I should say that, remember, if you have an open roadside and you have rain that comes and runs into that road ditch, then the sun heats it up. And so the water gets hot, warm. And then that ditch goes into a stream or a river, and what you're doing is putting warm water or hot water into the stream or river, which is not good for some fish and other species there. So ditches, if you can hold the water and not put hot water into the stream, that's a good thing too. Yes, there's a ditch. This is in China. Okay, now let me broaden out to the road network and the whole landscape. So these are road networks with high road density and low road density here. And these are just illustrate a lot of ways that road density it may be important. We can correlate many things with road density. And road density is measured as the total number of kilometers per unit area. So if you took an average kilometer squared, how many linear kilometers of road is there in that? And that's road density. And you can say human access, fire, many things are correlated with road density. It turns out that road density is a good way to start. You can get Landsat images, you go on Google Earth or wherever you have, and you can calculate road density very easy. I think what I've seen is that road density is a good way to start, but it only gives you maybe 10 or 20% of the variability of patterns. That is, it's a way to start, but you need to get beyond it. And I think a more important, the next step is what I think of as network form. What is the optimum form of a road system, of a road network? And interestingly, we don't know. There's very little literature. Anybody in here could take that topic and write a thesis on it and really push the envelope, give us some good new insights. So this is what my students call a Formanism, a Formanismo. This is and so the idea is that a grid is not very good ecologically. Now actually I can't cite much evidence for that. But no species evolved with a grid, a perfect grid. So no species evolved with it, and we can describe many landscape ecology spatial patterns which are not grid that species do like, so to speak. And so we just say it's bad. I can't prove that, but I think there's a lot of indirect evidence. So here's a road density, and here's the same road density, but what we've done is we've concentrated most of the road density down in one corner. So that's good. Yeah, good. Same road density, and so now you have 3 big forest patches here, for example, and with roads going here. And it turns out that it's still better if you reduce the road density, but you provide for the same total traffic, amount of traffic. So these two provide the same amount of traffic flow. So if you want to get 50,000 vehicles per day across the landscape, those both do the same. And we have a lot of good evidence that there's much less environmental impact if you concentrate traffic on larger roads than have that same amount of traffic dispersed on smaller roads. And that's what this is doing. It's saying fewer large roads cause much less environmental damage than many small roads. And there's nice data from Germany and other places. And then still better is to have some of those wildlife underpasses and overpasses which connect these large patches here. And I'll have to tell you that right now I'm working on a really futuristic article for the future of road systems that will actually help nature and actually help energy and recreation and food production, other things. Working with an automotive engineer, and we have a very futuristic article which will get us a still better option out here. But I'm not going to talk about that because it's too avant-garde. This is in Germany, over an area of Germany over 1 century. So it's going for 100 years. And these are little villages here with the roads that connect them. And here the village is 1900. And then here, and coming up here. And what you see is that the villages turned into towns. They turned into population growth. And they also, there's some strip development or ribbon development happen here. And some villages are connected. And notice that there's not so much change on this side. Most of the change on this side. And the reason is that here, they built, about here, before this, well, here, they built a major highway. They built an expressway down this side. And so the expressway stimulated growth. Some Amazon roads stimulate growth. Roads all around the world stimulate growth. And so huge growth happened over here. So if you want to stimulate growth, then build a new road. There you are. It's a simple. No, it's not simple. But notice then that if this is your landscape and you were trying to protect large wild animals, for example, then the only places left maybe are over here and over here on this left side here. That is, nature would be better protected there. So if you want to have growth here or you want to have growth here, then add a highway. Yeah, suppose you were driving along a road and you saw this. This is in Catalunya, España. And you say, oh, that's very nice. It's very nice. The sheep are grazing and everything. And then you look more carefully and look at the sheep right here. Those sheep are all plastic. Those are all plastic sheep. And that's a design thing. So you have to watch out. You have to watch out for Forman, because Forman will do things that you don't know. Let me skip this. Next. Next. No. Okay. What I skipped was the idea of metapopulation dynamics. And some of you who know what that means can immediately realize that road networks are very important in metapopulation dynamics. And those of you who don't know about that, we humans are fragmenting the land all the time. And we are creating metapopulations. We are making metapopulations everywhere. So we better understand then the idea of metapopulation. The governor of Minas Gerais should understand about metapopulations. You must teach. So here is this is a little paper we did some years ago. And the idea was, where is the best place for a road and where is the worst place for a road? If you're going to build a road, where's the best place and where's the worst place? That was the question. And so I'll just simplify by saying, here's a large natural patch of forest, for example. Here's that's the matrix. Here's a large patch. Here's a small patch. Here's some corridors, hedgerow, stream, so on. And so for this, and we're interested with our essay is habitat loss, habitat fragmentation, habitat degradation, alteration, and fragmentation or connectivity. And so we add a road here, we add a road, and it turns out the worst place to put the road is right here, to go through, to dissect the large patch. Of all the options, that's the worst. And the next worst is actually perhaps right here, although there's some other problems over here. And the same idea, if you do a network, a road network with the same design, the worst is right here, and the next worst is right here. So do anything you can to try not to dissect or bisect a large natural patch. I think that's the bottom line there. Back to China. I'm sorry, Brazil is where I wanted to really come. But the Chinese invited me, and China is building an expressway system just overnight, all across the country right now. China and India and Eastern Europe. And so I had to go to China. So this is a highway that's avoiding a wetland. This is a big wetland right here. It goes off in that direction. And so they raised the highway so that, and you'll notice it's a big highway. It's a wide highway, in order to permit the hydrology and the wetland species to go. And let's go to the next one there. Actually, go back to 1 minute. These are different ways of changing the world. Yes, these are generic spatial patterns for change. So you can perforate, you can incise like this, you can dissect. I was just talking about dissection or bisection. You can fragment, like taking a plate and dropping it into pieces. You can shrink, get smaller, and you can eliminate it or disappear. And I just want to show you this one right here. The idea of a road that goes into a park, for example. And that probably, if you had to eliminate any road and have the biggest environmental benefit, if you could eliminate that road right there, you would probably, per kilometer, you would have the best gain, the best advantage to people. And the main reason is it provides human access and hence human degradation to that large green area. So if you were, I met somebody here who knows a woman in Montana who works with a sort of a progressive radical organization that's trying to eliminate roads. This woman is actually working to eliminate roads. I mean, she's really something. And so per kilometer length, if you wanted to have the biggest impact, there's your biggest impact. And this is in Redwood National Park in California, where there are big redwoods and other species there. And this was a logging road along here, where more than 50 years ago, they came in, they cut the road, and they came in to log and take out big trees. And the national park has been removing roads. That's what this woman does. Has been removing roads. And you might think, well, that's easy to remove a road. In fact, removing a road is very difficult, and especially if you have a steep slope like this, because what you have to do is you have to pull the terrain back up onto the roadbed. You have to get machinery to pull it back up, and that causes a lot of damage to the stream, but it's temporary damage because you resuspend the sediment there. But this is actually a road that has been removed, and they're now planting it. They have planted it, and the vegetation will come up. The idea of a road effect zone is an idea that what this is. I work with transportation planners and engineers a lot. And the transportation planner that's planning a road does really good, careful, wonderful work in a very narrow zone, using nice equations and so on. And then there's some people like me who come along who would say, we need to think about the whole landscape, the water flowing, the wildlife, and things like that. And so how do you get those two perspectives together? And this road effect zone is the solution that we've come to that some of the engineers really like. And the idea is, here's a road, this is distance from the road, and you make a list of all the environmental factors that are important. And this is just a simple list of maybe 10 or 12. but they're 40 or 50 that I know. And you make that list, and then you say, well, how far out from that road is there a statistically significant effect? And you draw that. And so this road is having a significant effect at that distance for this variable here. And beyond it, it's not significant, and therefore it's not the responsibility of transportation. It's the responsibility of society or other things. And so what you do is you do this for these, and you remember a road is cutting through a mosaic. So you have fields and woods and different things. And so there are different variables, there's a mosaic, and there are three driving forces that determine this distance. And one is, of course, traffic is one, but upslope, downslope. And these are the things that are driven by gravity, the force of gravity. So, and these are water related. And then upwind, downwind, these are things that are related to temperature or wind differences. And then this has to do with the microtopography and the quality of habitat on different sides of the road. You drive a road, you're going to have a picnic, and you stop and you look. I don't like that side, I like this side. I had my picnic here. The animal does the same thing. It says, I like this, I don't like that. So when the road effect zone is simply a zone that goes like this around the road on both sides, in which there's a statistically significant environmental effect. And that's the responsibility then of transportation, working with ecologists and others. And beyond that, that is not transportation's responsibility. And we mapped that for an area near Boston. And then I want to show you, this is kind of nice. This is the Dutch study, the Netherlands. And here's taking the whole landscape. And there's many tens of kilometers across. Germany is over here. Amsterdam is up here. And what the Parliament said to the Ministry of Transport was to map the National Ecological Network. The National Ecological Network. And basically the National Ecological Network are the large green patches, what I call emeralds, because remember, women tell me that emeralds are the most valuable big green things. I don't know. But these are the large green emeralds, and then the lines are the major wildlife corridors or presumed wildlife corridors, and these are the water corridors here. And then Parliament said to the Ministry of Transport, superimpose on that the main road network. And that's what this is, the ecological network and the main road, the expressway network. And so they've got these here. And where there are conflict zones or bottlenecks, the conflicts are the circles. So that's where the ecological network and the main road network have conflicts. Conflicts on water and wildlife, various things. And then the Parliament says, here's some money. Eliminate 40% of those circles, those conflict zones, within 6 years. And they did it. They eliminated it. And some of the places are right here and here and here. There's mapped some of the places they did it. And so they went back to the Parliament and said, we did it. We would like more money. The Parliament gave them more money to eliminate the next 35% of the conflict zones within, I forget how many years, the next year. And so they were working on that. It's a very simple mechanism working with government and road ecology. And this is a similar example in Florida. It's one state in the United States where we do it rather well. This was based on a GIS model with 8 variables, things like rare species and riparian zones and bear roadkills and other things. And for every segment in the state of Florida, they did it. And then the government, the Florida Department of Transportation says, okay, we're going to spend money. We will put our money here and not put our money there, because we have more success per dollar or per mile of road, kilometer of road there. So it's a way of setting priorities there. Very simple GIS exercise. And keep going. The Dutch also are very interested in compensation. And the idea between ecological compensation is that if you have an environmental impact here of some kind, and you just can't mitigate it, it's too difficult to mitigate, there's no easy way to do it, that is to improve it, then get an equal amount of ecological value somewhere else and protect that. And we do that some places in our country, not too much, but a little bit. And they've got 3 overpasses here. There's a big one, and there's a little one, and that's a middle-sized one up there. And that's a way, so they put the road down, and the reason is to provide connectivity for the local residents, including the farmers, and for wildlife. And Germany has done a lot of this. Actually, several European countries have done it. Where I worked in Barcelona for the mayor and head planner for some years, there were 7 of these in the Barcelona region. That is within 65 kilometers of the center, around the center of the city. There were 7 that already existed. And they were done for local residents, farmers, local residents, wildlife, and also hikers, hiking trails to go across. Or you could go underneath, and these are long routes in Spain. This is Spain. This is in Germany. They permit floodwaters to go through, permit wildlife to go through. A woman here, Carme Rosell, is a real expert in these sorts of things in Spain, southern Spain. This is in China.